Well, welcome to Medical Sales U. I am your host, Dave Stair. Today's guest is Kevin Kelleher. He wears multiple hats. So, Kevin, we're glad to have you. But Kevin is the Director of Medical Affairs at Medtronic in the diabetes space, and he's also the founder of the Rural Health Technology Consortium. So he brings a unique mix. Kevin was a nurse, and he has climbed the ladder in leadership. We have a lot to learn from him. I think those who have been seasoned in the industry can learn a lot from his leadership experience, now being director of medical affairs, but also a business leader. And also he can relate to those who are clinicians. And so, Kevin, great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Well, Kevin, tell us who you are. Who is Kevin Kelleher? Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know we connected on LinkedIn. You have an impressive background. But tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Yeah, thanks. And again, thanks for the invitation. And, you mentioned that I used to be a nurse, and I always say this kind of tongue in cheek. I still am a registered nurse in the state of Ohio and a couple other states that we have reciprocity with now. But I do feel a little less like a nurse because I'm not at the bedside. I didn't wear scrubs. I never worked in a hospital. And so all of my life has always been, all of my clinical nursing life has really been in the chronic disease space. And so really starting out at the chair side, working in dialysis units with dialysis patients that are coming in center for hemodialysis, and really kind of understanding the chronic disease space and that continuum of care versus kind of more of the acute side of nursing.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So take us back to like college. What were you like thinking about? What made you tell us about the early days? Because we have people from all different. We have people in their 40s reinventing themselves in our program, but we also have those out of college who are just trying to kind of figure it out. But if you look back then, what were you thinking in college, and tell us about the early days of your career?
Yeah, and it's really funny because actually my beginning and my first degree option or choice was in radio and television production.
Okay.
And so this was back when MTV actually had music.
Okay.
And grunge was good. Right.
Yeah.
And so really wanting to get into the entertainment space, I did an internship with Victor Victoria in the summer.
Wow.
And then, really kind of that wasn't the right fit.
Okay.
Went through the restaurant and bar circuits and management and those kind of spaces. And it was really after 9/11, a lot of my family's from New York and the East Coast there. And how can I do more for life? And do more than just getting people drunk on the weekends, right? And so that's where I decided to go back to nursing school and started at the associate level, went through and got an associate degree.
Okay.
Had DaVita paid for my bachelor's. There's a lot of programs for associate to bachelor's.
Excellent.
And then just recently went back finished about 5 or 6 years ago with my master's in health informatics from UC, or University of Cincinnati.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And so you've been at Medtronic for how many years?
10 years now. So
10
I
years.
Celebrated my 10th anniversary May 15th.
What was the first position that you had at Medtronic?
Yeah, so I came to Medtronic as a clinical territory manager or specialist. It was really the clinical support to our territory managers in the field.
Yes.
And so the reason that I kind of made that jump, or what made me realize that I had the opportunity, was my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And when the rep came over and I met the rep for Medtronic and they showed us the insulin pump, and this was back in 2012, right? And so very different time, 2013. And really seeing, there's nurses that train people on the insulin pumps, and there's nurses that are teaching the physicians and the HCPs how to use these devices, and really saw the clinical role in that side of sales in a whole new light. And so then I figured it'd be easy to get a job for Medtronic. I'm a nurse. My kid has diabetes. Like, it's double win. And apparently getting into sales is a little bit tricky when you don't have experience, right?
Yes.
And so it took some time until the territory was able to grow. And then I supported the greater Dayton, Ohio territory, and launched the first automated insulin delivery system here in Ohio. And so that was really a great kind of pinnacle part of my sales career. And then, of course, getting the trophy in the ring at the end of COVID and being able to exit at that high peak.
So when you first saw so your daughter got diabetes and you saw the need for innovation, did you reach out to Medtronic, or did you do you remember those early conversations that you had?
So it's really funny when we think about the relationships that HCPs and physicians have with medical reps, right? We've had years of mistrust of the systems. We can thank different organizations and different good movies out there. And so that handoff from a healthcare provider to a rep is a really interesting handoff. And in all honesty, when we went and we had talked about technology with our provider, she handed us a box of a bunch of pumps that didn't have batteries in it. And she said, pick the one you like and call the rep associated with the pump. And it's like, this is how we pick our medical devices. And fortunately, we picked the right one at the time with Medtronic, and the reps were amazing and beautiful and really kind of walked us through that entire transition. But it was really seeing the autonomy that the reps have, and in that continuum of care, how they augment the provider's ability to practice.
How's your daughter doing now?
Now she's 15 and we just graduated 8th grade.
Okay.
And, high school's coming up, so I get to relive high school all over again. So
that's great.
Looking forward to it.
Tell me again, you have 5?
So she's the oldest of 5.
Okay.
So Catherine is 15, and then I have a 13-year-old, 2 11-year-olds, and a 9-year-old.
I love it.
And the 9-year-old, I actually found out that my wife was pregnant when we were at sales training.
Okay.
And so I just started this new role in sales. I'm studying the night before the test, and she calls me saying that we're pregnant with our 5th kid. And I'm like,
amazing.
So here we are 10 years later, and I got a 9.5-year-old. So
I love it. That's fantastic. I had my 4th on the way, so I love it. I was a single for, I was single for the longest time. Got married when I was 40. Left Dallas, moved here to Columbus, Ohio, and my wife loaded me up with Buckeye gear. And it was interesting because my stepdaughter, she's now 12. And then 2 weeks after I got married, my wife is pregnant. So I have a 3-year-old, I have now a 1-year-old, and another on the way. So
it's about to get hectic.
It's about to get hectic. We were at the pool earlier. I'm taking off some time this week. And so I appreciate you making the drive. And what was the drive in? About an hour?
About an hour.
About an hour?
That's not bad at all.
Not bad at all. Well, I appreciate you doing that. Okay, so you got promoted to be the director now of medical affairs. Tell us about, a time of 10 years at Medtronic, a very well-respected company. What was that? What did that look like? What was the second position that you took?
Yeah. So, kind of just like when you're in that position, you make that leap into a sales role or a new kind of shift. I got the trophy and got the ring and kind of felt like I was at the top of my game, right?
And what does that mean that you got the trophy? Was it mean that you
so
won?
A lot of times in different sales, in pharma sales and device sales, usually there's, the top 10% or the President's Club winners and those kind of things. So there's usually a trophy and a ring or a prize or something, right?
Yes.
And so it's really kind of reaching that pinnacle part for your district and territory and company for that season.
Yeah.
And so at Medtronic Diabetes, it was a 2-year running tab. So when you finally get it, it takes a while to get there. But then really looking for what's my next opportunity. And this opportunity opened up about 5 years ago. So COVID was just starting. We had a new research director come in, or a new medical director of research come in. And I have a dual role where I kind of sit on the fence between R&D and the commercial organization. And so in my role as a clinician, but also in sales, I now sit on the approval board for all of our medical, legal, regulatory approval documents. So all the content that we send out to our sales teams, all the content that you guys use and use to promote with the products and the HCPs, making sure that it's compliant and meets all the regulations.
And now, how did they ask you? I guess you were doing so well in your role. You won the award. Did some of the leadership say, we need Kevin to be part of this decision-making process?
So I don't know that they reached out to me. It was more that I applied for this new role.
Okay.
And then, just all the changes over the last 5 years, especially coming out of COVID and social media, social media and podcasts and the whole environment around diabetes is changing, right? And it's very consumer driven. And so marketing is changing, but we need to make sure that we rely on the accuracy that our products are shown according to the instructions for use and meet all the FTC, FDA regulations. And so that's where taking that experience from the sales side and also my clinical acumen really made me kind of that perfect person to sit there and review all of that content with our regulatory team and our legal team.
When you say it's changing, do you think that's like the way they're marketing with how's it changed the most?
Because in my role now, it's a global role over the last couple of years, and you really see the differences between the different markets in the U.S. where healthcare is very consumer driven.
Yeah,
20 years ago, we never would have seen commercials for different prescription drugs. And now it's all the time.
Yes.
Right. And now we see prescription drugs for drugs that are such a rare disease state that you're like, why is this on TV? Right. But now people are asking their doctors, this is what I want. I saw this on TV. I saw Nick Jonas wearing this, or I saw so-and-so wearing this. Right. And so it's a very consumer focus.
It is. Interesting.
And that's where, fortunately, we've got, the FTC to help to balance that, to make sure that we're doing things the right and ethical way.
That's interesting. I don't want to get too much into politics here, but and I mean, most people who watch me, know that I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian, but I know that there's been some pushback. I even saw RFK saying about making comments about doing away with commercials and so forth like that. And but I have mixed feelings, I guess, from an ethical standpoint. I think one of the things that I often think about is shared decision making, and I think one of the positives about commercials is it does allow the patients to at least know about something, right?
Absolutely.
Or previously they would not know about it. And so I do think, and a lot of times, and I would, I'd consider myself conservative. There's sometimes pushback, but I'm like, I'm all for, like, we say freedom of choice, freedom of ideas. And I think one of the things is like, man, healthcare is so complex, right? And I think I do think there is like that aspect that sometimes things are changing so fast. But if a patient can at least hear about something, at least have a conversation with their provider and say, look, here's a couple of options here. And of course, there is regulatory that you see at the end of all these commercials. Whatever the disease, there's this long list, and you're like, no thanks, I'll just take none of them, right? Because there's a long list for compliance sake. Because anytime there's a clinical trial, there's there's adverse reactions. It does not necessarily go perfect with any of these. Okay, so you've been promoted a couple of times. So, Director of Medical Affairs, what is it like? What does a day-to-day look like for you?
So really, I run a couple of different teams, and it's really not only a leadership and kind of a people leader position to help to drive strategy that comes down from our ex-com and our leaders above, but also providing that clinical acumen. So, in the field and in the commercial side, and I'm not sure how your organization is, but there's some people that are clinicians that came into sales, and then there's some salespeople that have learned to be clinical. Right. And as you start to move upstream and kind of into the R&D specter, there's a lot less clinicians and people that have actually touched real life patients. Right. And so how do you kind of drive that acumen and that subject matter expertise up that pathway to innovation? And so that's really where kind of we're focusing on how do we bring more of the outside in perspective or inside out perspective.
Yes.
To continue to meet our people where they need to be and where our patients want us to be.
So in the diabetes space, like I'm in cancer. So at the time of this recording this weekend is ASCO, is the big conference where all the oncology physicians are. I don't go every year, but what are the big events where there's breakthroughs in diabetes space? Where what would be some of the conferences across America that there's announcements for breakthroughs, or where those key opinion leaders or thought leaders are? What would you say are some?
At the end of this month, we have the big American Diabetes Association meeting in Chicago.
Okay.
And so that happens every year, and it's the largest conference for diabetes here in the United States. And it's a really good broad spectrum of all the different research and technology that's out there. And then outside the U.S., there's the Technologies Conference that usually happens twice a year, in Europe once, and then in Asia. And that's where we really see just the difference in technology that all the different players in the world are bringing to the table. And when we look at just the innovation that's driving, it's really interesting to see how this consumer space of healthcare is really crossing over, right? So we've seen continuous glucose monitors move into the consumer space, and now you can get it off of Amazon and have it delivered within a couple hours. Yeah. When 12 years ago, that was brand new technology, right? And so it's really cool to see how the industry is really shifting and changing.
Oh, that's great. Your space has been fascinating, to say the least. Now, Medtronic's going through some changes. I know you can't tell everything that's going on, but can you share anything with us about, we read the press releases about, this division splitting off. What can you share with us? I know without giving away too many secrets.
Yeah. And like I've talked about, the diabetes industry as a whole. And really, it's a community built of people living with diabetes every day. You know, I've had the fortune to work with some very brilliant engineers and geniuses that are pioneering devices because they wear the devices or their kids do. And so it's a really passionate, technology-driven community. And when we think about just the different businesses that Medtronic has, you know, a couple of weeks ago, they announced that they're going to separate the business. And so they'll have lots of announcements and pieces along there. But really, it's to meet the needs of our population. And people living with diabetes, it's growing. It's a very pervasive disease state. And there's so much opportunities to really impact care in so many great ways. And that's where, you know, fortunately for my daughter, she's been able to help to pioneer a lot of this and been, you know, fortunately my own internal test dummy. And she's 15, so she's teenage dummy. But, you know, how can we continue to meet the needs of our patients? And this is just really a great opportunity to make changes in the industry.
Yes. Okay, Kevin, there might be someone listening to us, maybe they're a nurse and they have that clinical background, but yet they have a passion for this area. And maybe themselves has diabetes, or maybe someone they care about, their family they love, kind of like your story. What would be some practical steps that you would give them if they wanted to break into this industry, whether it's device or maybe a breakthrough treatment on a pharmaceutical drug? Are there any pieces of advice that you would give them if they want to make that transition? Maybe they're a nurse, maybe they've been by the bedside, and they want to work for a large medical device or pharmaceutical company. What advice would you give from your perspective?
Yeah, you know, the first thing, I think sales really gets a bad rep, right? You think about the used car salesman or the reps that are always dropping off lunch every day and knocking on the doors and, it's a sales rep.
Right.
But as clinicians, really realizing that you sell every day, right? If you can walk into a person's room and say, I'm going to stick this sharp object in an uncomfortable place and then introduce who you are, you know, that's selling.
Exactly.
And being able to understand that you're selling from a solution sales model. And, you know, if I was a good salesperson, then maybe you know, I could take your class and learn the different sales models, right? Challenger sale versus solution sales. But really, that's what clinicians do. We are offering a solution. Yeah. And when you turn that around and turn that into a sales solution, how does your product meet the needs of that provider that you're in front of? Whether it's a cancer provider or it's an endocrinologist or it's a person living with diabetes. How does my product or my portfolio of products really meet your needs? And that's what clinicians are doing all the time. You know, whether you're a dietitian trying to have somebody change their diet and their lifestyle, or you're a nurse in the hospital having someone change their bed, right? That's what you're doing.
That's selling.
And so really understanding and embracing that. And then looking at those opportunities. You know, are you working in the ICU and you're like, oh, who makes this bed? Oh, well, you know what? That bed has an entire R&D department, and they hire clinicians every day. And then there's a sales department that's out in every state and every country, right? And so really looking at the things that are around you, reading the labels, and then just looking at the websites. Because realizing the acumen that you develop as a clinician, and we can't teach that. Maybe you teach it better than others, but it's really hard to teach a non-clinician clinical practice. It's easier to teach a clinician sales and have them really be successful.
I love that. You know, I think a couple points that you bring in is that we're all selling. I remember, you know, I came from the nonprofit space. I studied philosophy. I studied religion. I actually was a teacher. I was going on mission trips. And I remember teaching, there was an older man, Zig Ziglar at my church, who would write and he would say, we're all selling something. And when I was trying to break into this industry at 35, you know, I didn't have that technical sales experience, but, you know, I said, you know, as a teacher, I had to take complex ideas and make them accessible to students. And, you know, and then I had some metrics. I worked for a nonprofit. They asked me to speak a certain amount of times. I said, well, I blew it out of the water. I spoke this amount of times and I had written some books. So I try to have some metrics, some numbers, some statistics. That's one of the things that we teach our students is if they can show how they've demonstrated complex ideas and found solutions. Because I say, look, you may not say that you're in sales, but have you ever had a patient who's apprehensive, who has questions, and that you come in, and it's not that you have to explain everything, but you can come in to explain what is necessary for that patient to understand and to trust you. And that's selling. And the other thing I love that you said, Kevin, is to become a great noticer. That's one thing that we tell our students in our program. We practice it. Is when they're interviewing, to become a great noticer of the person they're talking to. What can they observe about them? Or they message someone on LinkedIn rather than just sliding into their DM and saying, I see that you work for this company. Can I pick your brain? We say, don't do that. We say, what can you notice specifically about their posts? What can you notice about, okay, if they're in a particular division, can you do your work and notice and maybe use ChatGPT to say, okay, this person's in this division in diabetes with this company, what products are out there? So that when they come in and they go to someone's direct message, they have an educated conversation. And I think likewise, if there's nurses, to pay attention to the brands, the products that they are using on a day, that they are, administering to their patients on a daily basis. I think that's great advice.
And I think, you really speak kind of playing to your strengths, right? So as a clinician, we don't know sales. I don't know sales model. I know Zig Ziglar from, way back when. Right. I can't quote the latest, challenger sale model, solution sale model experts, but really understanding your strengths and then admitting your faults too. I remember, and I'll call out Mike Bockhorst just because, he kind of started me on this path, but he was the district manager that I interviewed with. And I remember his first question was, how many people with type 1 diabetes are on the insulin pump? I was like, I don't know. And I remember walking out of the interview being like, I guess this isn't for me. And I was surprised when I got called by the regional director to come in and interview again. But it was really, I think, that authenticity and just admitting, I don't know, but here's how I can find out. And here's what I do know. And then playing to your strengths. I
like that, playing to your strengths. And we all have different strengths. And if our students can bring that to the interview process, and then there'll be training to sharpen up, some of those weaknesses as well. Okay, let's jump in here. You started the Rural Health Technology Consortium. One, tell us about what that is and how did you find the time to do that, working a full-time job and, 5 kids?
It really is a growing need. And one of the things that I think is really cool about the field sales role is that you have the opportunity to be in everybody else's house, office, walking into a doctor's office, how they set up their office, seeing how things roll out, right? And you have to customize your solution. And even if you're like, I need you to prescribe more of this one pill. Okay, how do we make it easier? What are the steps that we can not grease the wheels, make the friction smoother to get to the prescription, right? Or to meet the needs of the patient. And so as that sales rep and you're seeing this disconnect between, and for me, really in launching the first automated insulin delivery system, where in populated urban areas like this, they're like, sure, no problem. And we're not talking about advanced artificial intelligence at the time. We're talking about kind of rudimentary machine learning. But the further out you go, and especially here in Ohio, you get a little far out and it's very, very rural, right?
Yes.
Where people are afraid of AI because, the Terminator was AI.
Right.
And so how do you start to break down those barriers? Because I know for me, the technology that I sold and have worked on for 20 years is amazing. But how do we break down those barriers and really help people understand how to use it, and then how to advocate for it. And so that's where the consortium really birthed from.
When did you start this?
40 years ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, really, it's been kind of a passion, a driving drum in my head for all my life of here's this disconnect as we grow technology and we see this disconnect, whether it's rural or Hispanic populations or African-American populations, there's a disconnect and that comes from mistrust, right? And if we're going to truly solve the healthcare problem, we have to figure it out for everybody. And sometimes in order to fix the problem, you have to get small and start from the ground up.
How do if you're in rural areas of Ohio and different areas, what are some of the steps to building trust with
it's just like you said, really understanding your product, understanding your client, understanding who you're talking with.
Yes.
What motivates you? I know that you have kids, you have young kids. So I automatically know that we can talk about diapers, right? I can talk about daycare.
Yeah.
I already know the pain points for you, but I'm assuming that you could be independently wealthy and you could have diapers delivered, everything. Those, like, you could care less. And if I don't know those unique things, then my solution's not going to work.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times we paint with that broad brush of, this is what, we have our HCP profiles, right? And, this is a driver and this is this person. But what's their motivation? Why are they practicing medicine here today?
Well, I like that. Let's jump in here, talk a little bit just personal.
Yeah.
You got 5 kids.
Yeah.
What we got planned for this summer? I know this is probably going to be released in the fall, but
it's a lot. I really think that year-round school was a nightmare for me when I was in school, but it's an interesting thing.
Wait, tell us about that. Year-round school?
It would totally be good if you only have to take 2-week break vacations versus having 3 months off.
Right.
Where you have to fill summer camps and day camps to make sure that they are occupied and God forbid, sitting on the couch all day in front of a TV like we were.
Yes, yeah.
So it's definitely a challenge. And then between baseball and softball, my nights are busy.
Wow, a little base. Yeah. So your youngins play a little baseball, huh?
Oh yeah.
Were you a baseball player back in the day?
Lots of baseball.
Yeah. So you play a little baseball back in the day?
Yeah, a little bit back in the day, and it's really good for the kids, and it's a good team building sport, right? How do you learn the different positions? And if we can make a cheesy segue here, when you're interviewing for that sales role, and the district manager, whoever you're interviewing with, are they the quarterback for their district?
Yeah.
Don't come in there trying to be the next quarterback. You need to be the running back, or you need to be the first baseman, second baseman.
I love that.
And really figuring out where you play in that diamond is important, because then you're complementary versus competitive.
I like that. That's a good analogy. I think I like the sports. I'm tall. I'm 6'7", so I go into doctors' offices all the time. They're like, where did you play basketball? I'm like, well, I played a little bit at Oak Hill Academy in Liberty. They're like, well, what position did you play? I'm like, I played center bench.
Exactly.
So that's my I averaged 34 points a game in warm-ups.
Yep.
I was a star in warm-ups. I used to put on a show, but no. Okay, so you're busy. You got full-time day job, 5 kids. You got another business helping people in rural areas as well. Let's talk a little bit about your personal growth.
Sure.
Because we have people, and I think sometimes people get just stuck, working the same job over and over. Now, we need people to be nurses for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
We need people to be teachers for a long time. No matter, farmer reps, whatever it is, but sometimes people just get stuck in the same old, and they don't grow as individuals. You've been promoted. You're always having to adapt, I'm sure, as a father, but what's some of the books that have impacted some of your leadership? I know you're a reader.
Yeah. So one of my favorites has always been recently is Mission Driven Leadership, and I would butcher his last name, so I'll just say it's Mark.
Who's this?
Mark Bertolini, my Italian.
I'm gonna hold this up here.
There we go.
I've not heard of this one here.
So he's a former head of Aetna, and really talks about kind of mission driven leadership.
Really,
to align your passions with your leadership. And he has a number of good points, and really focuses on kind of that purpose over profits. And so if you're working towards your passion, the profits will come as long as you're kind of pushing in the right way, right?
Okay.
If you're finding the purpose, the money comes along with it. The other piece that he's really well known for is this radical humanity and humanism. And really, when I think about the people on my team and taking value in them, how do I develop them into not something that I need, but something that they need, right? So the biggest compliment for me as a leader is someone that leaves and moves on or is promoted out of my team. That's great, And I tell people day one, if this turns out to not work for you 6 months from now, let me figure out how to find that role for you that will.
I like that.
And it's about building people, not building teams necessarily.
Man, that takes true leadership. I remember one of my first podcasts. I had Jerry Acuff. He's written a number of books. He was on the podcast, and I said, okay, so when you're interviewing with the hiring manager, what are some of the best questions to ask? And one of the ones that he suggested is something along the lines of, well, tell me how many people that you've promoted within your team. And he said, go ahead and ask that to see how the hiring manager reacts to that. If they're a growing, thriving company, and you've done your pre-work, that hiring manager has been there for a long time, how many people have been promoted within that team? And I think that's a true sign of leadership, that we don't want stagnant, but we are secure in ourselves to see people rise in other positions and maybe above us, right? I've had students make way more money than I have and go on to more prestigious places. So I think, sometimes we're like, man, I should have gone down that path myself. But, that's our human tendency, but to celebrate someone else's win, even if they're younger than us, even if they're less experienced or less educated. I always think that's a great sign of leadership. So I'll have to get this one. Mark, I guess it's Bertolini.
You're going to butcher the Italian too. Huh?
Bertolini. This sounds like a good
Yeah.
book. And you got some other ones there. You got some other books there.
No, I just tried to bring some because, it's always good to work on self-development.
Yeah.
One of the things I talk about or kind of is one of my things is really when we think about developing, if you're learning to be a sales leader, you're reading all the sales books and sales journals and all this stuff. And so sales, but you don't know anything else. And so when you're going in front of these providers or these hospital systems, what else do you have to talk about? If all you know is the latest sales theory, that's not the best thing to do, right? How do we diversify our knowledge? And so whether it's through networking in diverse groups and more horizontal versus vertical, or really exploring other areas. And so Dan Ariely is becoming a good friend of mine. I got to meet him last year and work with him a little bit. And really understanding how we make decisions is really key in understanding that sales process or the clinical process or really just understanding life. And so he's written a number.
So this book is called Misbelief, What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. Why do you think rational people believe irrational things?
So, I don't want to give away Dan's book here, but really understanding how we make decisions and things that influence us without even realizing it, right? In the way, in good marketing groups will tell you, why McDonald's has golden arches and why the inside is red, right? But going in deeper and understanding why we make health decisions or why we make business decisions. And really, when you start to understand how decisions are made, you can start to get ahead of that and help that move faster.
So what helps us make the best decisions? What do you think? What would be a couple
really
practical?
Not stopping and really kind of this idea that if you're not growing, you're dying. And you just keep moving and pressing through and powering through to get to where you need to be. And don't get stuck in trying to figure out the best next step. Just take the next step.
I like that. I think we want to be committed to truth. We don't want to be gullible to believe certain trends just because everybody else. I come from a background, I studied philosophy, and I taught religion, taught philosophy, and I thought about for a season getting a PhD in philosophy. But I had my downside, and I think some people with an academic slant have this over-analytical perfectionism. And it can be a hang-up too with taking a medication or making any decision, career change, because life or marrying a person, right? Or going on a date, even just going on a date with a person is because I think some people struggle with not caring about decisions, right? And that can lead to, bad choices. And then, but the other flaw is this perfectionism, in which I think is like this idea that we put so much pressure to make the right choice that we're afraid to move forward. Right. And I think some of my audience is like that. They wait for the perfect moment to try to get into pharma sales. They need to get another degree. They need to get this experience first. And it's the same in their relationships too. And so I think I look forward to reading this one. And I think that'll be help. I think I heard someone say, I think it might have been my mother-in-law. She introduced me to my wife like years ago. We didn't date for like after 5 years after that. But it's like the concrete good is better than the abstract best. The concrete good, there are goods in front of us. It may be a medication, it may be a job opportunity. It may be in a relationship, and that thing is concrete and they're real and they're good. But rather than focusing on some idealism that is absolutely perfect in our minds that may not exist, sometimes it's best just to make the right next step forward and do that thing that is good, right?
No, absolutely. And when we think about, you talk about sports and being a center bencher. My NFL team is always the New York Jets. And they haven't been good since before I was born.
Who's going to be their quarterback this year?
I'm not even going to get into that. I've had too many jerseys I've had to replace over the last 30 years. But, forward motion is forward motion. And when we think about chronic disease states, and one of the things that we've really dove into in the consortium is around smoking and smoking in rural America. Unlike urban areas, smoking is still really prevalent, especially here in Ohio. It's like 20%. But when we look at, I don't want to quit smoking. Okay, well, let's just decrease. Let's change the way, make those small iterative steps where it's just one less cigarette, or, we think about AA and some of the sobriety steps. It's just one step and 1 foot in front of the next. And that's the same in sales. You don't need to get the big career, the executive sales role at the next leading manufacturer next week. just get in somewhere and make those iterative steps. And before you know it, you'll look back and you're 30, 40 steps past.
I love that. It's so good. And it's the same with our students. We had a student just a couple of days ago get an offer by one of your competitors with Stryker, and they're trying to move across the country. They've never been in the industry before, and it's a full-line rep job. It's not an associate. I'm like, they're offering, you don't have any relationships there, and they're offering you a full-line. It's not ideal, but I think you should take this, even if it's not perfect. And, I think sometimes we get in, we work, we try to make a difference, whatever culture we're a part of, whatever company we're a part of.
Oh, yeah.
And we try to make that place better where we are. And then, you know what? A couple of years down the line, you're either going to be promoted because of the success, or guess what? You might be recruited by someone else.
Yeah. And Mark talks a lot about that too in his book, and talk about making that personal change for yourself from an inside, and how that can lead to organizational change, and really understanding yourself as a person, as a leader. You can shift organizations in completely different directions just by the way that you kind of focus on your passion, and then it brings in the rest of it.
I'm going to try to I might have to get the audio books of this. I'm going to season with littles that I don't read as much as I used to.
And I will say that Dan has a number of podcasts, and he's been
really. I need to check this guy out.
Lots of good stuff. Yeah, he was actually. They did a TV show on the Peacock Network after his life.
2 books. This is good. We'll check both of those out. Let's talk about a little bit. What's one tool or tech that you cannot live without? Something that
it's really a good scheduling tool.
Yes.
And, I live and die by my calendar. And
what scheduling tool do you use?
So I'm kind of old school. I just have multiple Google calendars.
Really?
But we have them across my family. So each kid has their own calendar. We've got a family one, and then I've got my multiple work ones, and really prioritizing my life. But what I like most about my scheduling tools, and even like my booking stuff, is having time that's set aside. So here's my focus time on Monday mornings between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. where I am head down in this work, right? And
I love it.
Whether you chunk your work or however you do it, but really making sure that you're scheduling the time for yourself and your kids and your family, in addition to all the wonderful things that you can accomplish.
That's good. So if someone's listening and like, I need to get better at this.
Yep.
What would be like that next step that you tell that person?
Just, start compartmentalizing and finding ways to block your time, and finding the times that you're most effective. Like for me, going to the gym in the morning works. If it's past 10 a.m., I can't go to the gym. Like I can have nothing to do, but I'm not going to the gym. I'll sit on the couch. That. And so, when is your head down time? When do you need time up? And making sure that you're balancing that throughout your day so that you can really maximize that efficiency.
I love that. And this is one thing that I'm working on too, because I have a side business, and I'm delegating Monday and Wednesday nights and early Saturday mornings, but I have family too as well. So I'm trying to block off time for them as well. Like tonight, I'm taking my wife to dinner, so there's different times, but it is something that we need to get better. In fact, my wife and I were just talking about this yesterday as well, because as my LinkedIn has been growing in this podcast, I have people reach out to me daily and I just don't respond. So what are a couple of evenings I can just try to block out and limit it to 15 minutes.
Yep.
And then, once a month, we record these podcasts. We have the guys edit them out. We can spread them out. So they're bi-weekly, but it's something I can work on. And one final question here. Okay. What is one thing about you that people wouldn't guess about you by just looking at your LinkedIn? Like, we can know that you're a nurse on LinkedIn, but what is one thing that we wouldn't know about you?
So, one of my passions, and one of the, I kind of say this tongue in cheek, and it's really helped to align my mission, and one of my mantras is, and even as a conservative, this is going to come off potentially weird, but I'm very much about diversity and inclusion, and not from a sense of we need more people at the table kind of thing, but from a medical standpoint, we need more information about African-American females. We need more information about rural older people, right? And all of this data, we need to find ways to open up these communities. And that's where I think sales reps kind of play a good part in that healthcare bubble, is by going into these communities and going into these practices and understanding what's working and what's not working, and then communicating that back up. And so, when I talk about research and diversity in education, or research and participation in research, 80% of our clinical research is by middle-aged white men, which is great for you and I. All the drugs are made for us and they work. Yeah. But I have 3 daughters. I have two mothers, or a mother and mother-in-law. I have a wife, right? I have friends that are Hispanic, friends that are African Americans, and if the healthcare doesn't work for them, it doesn't work for me.
Right.
And so, how do we start to bring that and really bring that to the table? And that's where, now I'm working on making my personality and my LinkedIn page more about that, not just about my Star Wars fan fiction and the dream of being an organoid intelligence expert.
I hear that there's a complaint, and I'd love to get your perspective on this with your large, pharmaceutical company. I hear this concern that African American, patients are being overlooked, and for example, with clinical trials. But every single large pharmaceutical company takes pride in diversity, equity, inclusion. They take great pride. They talk about it frequently. Even across the board. There's the rainbows in June. I mean, constantly talking about it. But my curiosity is, like, whenever there is a major clinical trial, normally, let's just be honest, a lot of times they're international.
Yep.
And for some people groups, there might be a large Asian population, for example, with particular types of cancer. Why do you think it is the biggest challenges of getting either rural or African-American people to enroll in clinical trials? And what do you think? Because I know there's this eagerness to help those people, at least what they're telling us, but what's the biggest hang up or hurt of why large pharmaceutical companies have not been as effective as they really want to, or as if they put off? What do you think the challenge is there?
And it's really a two-sided problem. And so from a large manufacturer standpoint, the goal is to get the product to market as soon as possible.
Right.
And so we want to go to our trusted research sites. We want to go to the people that have been doing research for years, because when we submit data to agencies, then they get audited. And so for a large person or a large manufacturer to take a chance on a mom and pop provider in rural Alabama that has a great African-American population, it's a big gamble. And it's hard to get that infrastructure and that setup for that provider to be able to do research at the US FDA level. And so that's where it's a two-sided problem, but it really takes multiple facets to fix. The other part of that is not having the infrastructure to be able to do the studies in these areas, but then also the mistrust and how do you bring in a population that's been historically not only excluded, but significantly damaged by people that were bad people. And how do we get over that? And the only way you can do that is really by community engagement. There's been some great efforts through Walgreens and some of their transition as they get into the clinical trial space, being able to open up research sites and provide that in, urban areas that don't do research. But then really participating. I mean, do you give blood? I give blood every quarter, right? Because I know the health benefits of it. Do you know that if you participate in a research study, you might get some of your medication paid for free, right? And we think about this when you're diagnosed with cancer and it's a rare cancer. Oh, give me a clinical trial. But they're there for diabetes too, and they're there for heart disease.
Exactly.
And thinking about participating in research, not just for the altruism, but for the fact that we need it, or the world falls apart.
Yes. Wow, that's good. I like it. There's lots of opportunities to get involved. To participate. And so we're excited about what you're doing full-time with your full-time day job, but also with your second on the side. What is one last advice? I know our program we have multiple listeners, those who've been in the industry, but those who are brand new or just trying to think, should I get into this industry? Any other words of advice before we close this out?
And I'm starting to get there with my kids now. What jobs do they want to do? And you talk to these kids coming out of high school and go, I want the job that pays the most. I want to be the medical rep that is selling $2 billion robots and those kind of things. And if you're doing the job solely for the money, you're going to hate it eventually. And then sales is probably going to come really quick, because if you don't like it, it hurts, right? And so really finding that passion, and you can find passion around a prostate drug, or you can find passion and interest with a proctologist, right? And people go into these areas because at some core there is a passion. And so finding a way to turn your passion into your career, and then you don't work. We talk about my family, my life, my multiple streams. I don't work. This is my life. This is my passion. This is what I do. I can talk about this all day.
I love it. You're natural. Well, we appreciate you. Kevin, thanks for joining the podcast, and it was great to have you.
My pleasure, and happy to help.